Namaste and greetings. I, Naina Agarwal, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti, Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. Today, we are gathered here for the first day of a 3-day online certificate training program on disaster resilient housing and built environment, imperative for better policy, planning, and sustainable cities. This training program is organized by the National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, in collaboration with IMPRI, Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, New Delhi. I welcome you all to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and efforts into understanding the emerging issues considering the impact of policies in promoting sustainable habitat, built environment, and resilient cities, and helping us to bring together the practitioners and participants through this course for impactful policy research and action. The patron for this program is Shri Taj Hassan. Our conveners are Professor Anil K. Gupta, Dr. Soumyadeep Chattopadhyay, Dr. Simi Mehta, Dr. Arjun Kumar. This program is convened and moderated by Shri Tikendra Singh Panwar ji, former Deputy Mayor, Shimla, Senior Fellow, IMPRI. This 3-day program has an excellent panel of members who will be sharing the knowledge from our theme. The distinguished panel of members for this program are Professor K.T. Ravindran, Ms. Suhasini Iyer, Ms. Vanessa Peter, Professor Manoj Parmar, Mr. Sameer Unhale, Shri Romi Khoshla, Professor Darshini Mahadevya, Professor Shipra Mitra, Professor Manjula Bharti. The organizing team member for this program are Fatima Amin and Dr. Sweta Bedyadas, NIDM, Kushagra Khatri, Utkarsh Dwivedi, Diya Goswami, Fiza Mahajan, and Naina Agarwal, IMPRI. Before we start today's session, I would like to announce the housekeeping announcement once again. Please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your question on the Q&A box and not on the chat box. The question must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise. Refrain from making any general comment in the question to save time. Now, without any further ado, I would like to invite our first expert for the session, Shri Romi Khoshla ji. Sir is distinguished architecture, researcher and writer, director, Romi Khoshla Design Institute. Sir's topic is the coming urban decade, disaster or prosperity. Welcome you, sir, and over to you.
Tikendra sir has joined.
Thank you very much.
Tikendra sir, would you like? Yes.
I'm happy that you have made your last item of the housekeeping rules. You are refraining people from passing any general comments. Thank you for protecting me. Well, good morning. I'm not appearing on the screen as yet, but I have an IMPRI.
We can see you.
Okay, you can see this morning. Okay, very happy to to have you all. And I really welcome this chance to share some work in outline with you on my current work on urban transformations that are taking place around us, that I think are the center of concern of all the disciplines who are gathered here. The question before us is whether we are heading towards disaster, and there are enough people predicting disasters, or are we slouching? That's all I can say. We are slouching towards prosperity. I can't say we are racing there. Or we are pretending to become prosperous. I think that may be a little bit closer to what is really happening. Of course, there are many answers. It depends who you are, what you believe in. Now, as I give this talk, I'm fully aware that I'm now living in a new generation, amongst a new generation, who are living in an everlasting present. And so my approach to sharing ideas with you today looks a little bit dated in the past, because I'm dealing with the past and the future. And much of what I have observed amongst the new generation is that the present has become significantly more important. So to put ideas across today, which are not simple. Urbanism is not simple. Urbanism is a complex subject. So to put ideas across on urbanism, we have to compete with the internet, smartphones, social networks, and there's a proliferation of images which have killed the written word. Let's be aware of how few newspapers we read, how few articles we read, how much more YouTubes we see. So we have to be aware that the written word is slowly getting killed. So images are easier to take. They take less time. They remove the complexities in ideas and thoughts, because you put across simple ideas on a projection. So more and more of us are living in what I call real time. I want to just talk a little bit about, just for a minute or two, about the nature of how we are communicating with each other. We are in a Zoom talk, and I think it's appropriate for us to be aware of what we are losing and what we are gaining. So therefore, history and predictions about the future are becoming really not important anymore in this new realm of communication. And even then, I am taking the risk, and I am presenting to you some ideas which may seem complex. So rather than think of the image, I almost am requesting the old style. If you need to remember an idea, please take some notes. Things that people don't do now anymore. So my presentation is simply a sequence. I'm just presenting to you a sequence of ideas. I don't have a theory. I don't have a conclusion. I have observations which influence the way I work and how I see the world around me now. How do I see the present? Let me share with you, as I said I was going to do, with my ideas. How do I see the present? Fewer and fewer people, for me, are racing faster and faster towards prosperity, globally and nationally. But today, we are not here to discuss those people's lives. So my answer to the question whether we will see disaster or prosperity is both things will happen. We will see enormous prosperity in this country, and we will see enormous disasters taking place. This will continue to happen. There will be more and more prosperity for less and less people, and an increasing disasters for more and more people. Because the occurrence of disasters is beyond our control in our present system of governance. And in a sense, one of the central ideas that I'm proposing to you here is that because we are heading towards very difficult times, we may need to modify the way we govern ourselves. The vast majority, let's see it. The vast majority of those who live in cities are drifting further and further away from any hope of prosperity. Look, we've had COVID, we've had crop failures, we've had floods. So let's be realistic about this. For the vast majority, the process of urban transformations is going on at a speed and scale that is unprecedented. And the trend is not helping their lives. I mean, even if we take a simple thing like the mass migration, which went after the COVID, and the fact that very little of it has come back. So when we say transformations, we are not talking about medieval times or pre-independence time. We are talking about modern transformation that are taking place regardless of all theories that are being made and analyses and the nature of global phenomena, etc. The fact remains that the level of suffering amongst the majority of our people certainly hasn't improved. It's, if anything, gone worse. In fact, I noticed from the title of your seminar or teaching that disaster is uppermost also in the minds of the organizers. So I shall begin my talk with disasters and then conclude with what I feel are imperative as the solutions. So let's discuss the sort of pressures that are causing disasters and prosperity. So let's keep this in mind that let's speak on the national scale, but I keep flipping to the global scale also, because the same things are happening in global countries as well as in our countries. The coin has one side disaster, other side prosperity. Now, as this is occurring, there are 4 new changes that are taking place in all our settlements. Firstly, the ICT, the information and communication technology, is now in everybody's hands and on every worktop. Secondly, the lack of control over new kinds of man-made global calamities. When, of course, the most obvious one is the COVID calamity. But it is my belief that we are in the beginning of that phase now. And let us not forget that the COVID virus was a man-made virus, as we have now found out from the report that Lancet had commissioned. The third kind of uncontrollable change that is taking place is the natural global warming calamities. We had an excellent presentation from Peters on Chennai, and we saw the nature of the floods, and I don't think we should just disconnect that from the warming, global warming. Now, the fourth change, the context in which we are living our urban lives and rural lives, is the increase in over-centralized and unrepresentative governance. Democracy is not deepening amongst our communities. When I say deepening, it means that it is not good enough to exercise your democratic rights once in 5 years anymore. I think we have to move towards a much deeper sense of democracy, more regional sense of democracy, and I'll be discussing that in some detail. There is an increasing force of authority to govern from the top. This is global. Let's not forget that. It's nothing peculiar to India or to Iran or to Pakistan or to Ukraine or to Russia, in China. So let's talk of it in the wider context. We are highly connected to these countries. We are sharing trends with them. Outdated cities are being defended. Outdated nations are being defended. Don't forget, cities and nations are 19th century concepts. We are now in the 21st century. There is no reason to assume what we invented to become prosperous in the 19th century is going to be useful to us in the 21st and 22nd century. These are all pressures that give us both disaster and prosperity. The growth of IT, information communication technology, helps the tech industry, right? It helps the tech industry get profit. as well as it enables us to arrest people who don't agree with us. So it's not as if having a mobile phone in your hand is just benefits and benefits for us as citizens. Let us not forget the people who own that technology are also benefiting enormously. New man-made disasters, they help the pharmaceutical industry. Look at the wealth that the COVID virus was able to generate for the owners of the medicines that were used to treat it. Now, here again, I'm playing the fact that the disaster and the prosperity are going hand in hand. One is profiting from the other. New global calamities and the increased centralizations as a result of that benefit the large corporations in many ways. So our lives, particularly of the disadvantaged, are changing slowly. We should not forget the fact that the changes that I'm talking about are slow changes. They're changes that take place over a decade. If you look back on the telephone, it's only about 10 years ago that we were dialing on instruments, and we are here today. So these changes take place slowly in such a way that our body and our minds adjust to it, and almost as if no change has taken place. It's only when you look back you realize this. Look, the ICT, communication technology, the Amazons, they have changed our shopping, they have changed our traveling, they have changed the way we finance, the access we have to finance instruments. We are now promoting ourselves as startups, as individuals. We are making YouTubes about ourselves. Aadhaar cards have appeared. No, we should take these collectively as being the first change I was talking about, the influence of ICT on our lives and on our cities. Secondly, we've lost control over these new kind of man-made calamities on a global scale. We really don't know what's going to hit us, from where and why it's hitting us. It's simultaneous. If it hits us, it hits America, it hits England, it hits South America. But they're all basically, let's not forget, they're centered on urban centers, cities, etc. We should not forget that even a global pandemic like COVID is not just a physical occurrence. It has led to deep psychological crisis. It has led to aggressive behaviors, long-lasting depressions, anxiety, unemployment, closure of small businesses. So let's take the ripple effect of all of such things happening, and that they are beyond our control. So when we talk about disasters that are coming to us, our disasters that are going to come towards us are significantly, many of them are going to be beyond our control. Let's move to the third cause, global warming. The effects have already begun to influence our lives. I shall illustrate at the end of my talk the predicted effects on one of our coastal cities, which we have documented. We did have, as I said, Vanessa Peters gave us an excellent impact of what is happening in terms of Chennai. I'm sorry, that was the presentation was very interesting, because global warming had caused flooding, and the effect of that has been that there was a social transformation and people were removed from their slums and areas that they were occupying. So in all cases, we have to remember that each of the disasters that are affecting us are also affecting, coming naturally, but affecting our urban lives. Fourthly, globally, we are experiencing the two parallel trends, which I would like to explain a little bit more. you see, we are not only experiencing over-centralized governance, we are also witnessing during the last year or two, stateless control of global services, which are owned by a new set of corporations who own the media. Let's say that Musk buys up Twitter, right? There's one man, he uses his funds to buy up a company of communications, and entire lives change because of that. There are just a handful of people who control the communication network, and they are not national companies. They're individuals. They are supranational, what I would call them. So as the calamities approach, as the situation in each country becomes more precarious, like let's not forget the fact there's a big war going on in Ukraine in which thousands of people have died. We lost 18 million in the COVID epidemic due to not only directly but indirectly due to COVID. So these are huge things that are happening in very, very compressed time. And what has happened as a result of these calamities is that the political and corporate rulers have consolidated their power. But the corporates and the governance people are in league, help each other. So one thing is for sure then, both disaster and prosperity await us. It's up to the rulers to decide for whom we have to worry and to whom to help. And it's up to us to talk to the rulers and persuade them about a different point of view, which is why we are meeting here. One thing that we are living with today, I think we can say that, is that our day-to-day future has become more uncertain. I won't go beyond that. Those of you who are living from my generation have lived in relative peace. We've been lucky. Our generation been lucky. We've been living in relative peace for 75 years since the Second World War. And we have seen during that 70 years, we have seen the rise of features which we are now confronting. One, first of all, is the rise of the private city. I call it the private city because cities are private now. They're only technically government, but in fact they're private. We have seen the huge growth and prosperity of the middle class. During my lifetime, I have seen enormous rise of the comforts, the facilities, and the size and the wealth of the middle class, regardless of anything happening in this country. I have also seen the unstoppable rise of the rich. And unfortunately, during my life, I have seen a growing callousness and a desire to ignore the poor. That is at a very, very high level at this point. I now argue that these four things, that means the rise of the private city, the huge growth of prosperity in the middle class, the unstoppable rise of the rich, and the growing callousness and ignoring of the poor. But let me tell you, these four changes that are also taking place are almost causing this uncertainty. We are not able to change this. We are not able to control this. Let me give you an example from my life, my own life. Half a century ago, I used to walk alone 3 miles to school and come home again, and I was 7 years old in Simla, the capital of Himachal. This is unthinkable. Who would let his 6-7-year-old kid walk 3 miles to school alone? So things have changed when you look back. So let me summarize the aspect of all the larger disastrous items. Let's put it, let's represent it to you as an individual. So to you as an individual, I'm saying, what has changed you is that you are now living in a time of uncertainty in your lives, in your day-to-day life. So we need a different kind of collective urban and rural strategies to deal with the uncertainties that lie ahead. I want to put all our disasters, potential disasters I've been talking about and listing them for you in a broader basket, and which I call uncertainty. If I was to have a goal, regardless of whether you're rich or poor, I would say my life would become happier if things were less uncertain. If my life was less uncertain. For me, that's the goal of urbanization. That's the goal of city living. That's the goal of prosperity. Can my life be less uncertain? On a global and urban lives, they no longer depend on simple strategies. You know, 5-year plan will do this thing will do this. No, come on, it's not working at all. These were early formulas for imagining that people would become happy if 5-year plans were put into place and prosperity would spread. It just hasn't happened. We've been independent for long enough to know that. What we have seen is money-making Americans are ruling the world. In India, our own money-making politicians have reduced the complexities of our problems to simple issues: poverty, alleviate poverty, measure poverty, count poverty, how many are under the poverty, help them, who are over the poverty. You know, this is not really going to be very useful to us in terms of real strategies. I would put it under a blanket action plan: reduce the uncertainty in everybody's life. The 70-year-old bubble of peace that I was talking about has changed the global order. Cities are changing. The climate is changing. Our livelihoods are changing. We are changing. This is recent. This is the last decade or so. Our governments are changing. Our food and travel is changing. Everything is changing. Our shopping. We have a capacity to adjust, but that doesn't mean the change is not taking place. Now, in the coming 70 years, as I foresee it, this limitless accumulation that's been going on has to slow down. Those simple wealth accumulation strategies and policies have to change. Not because of agitation, not because of revolution, but because we will need multiple strategies to survive. In the coming decades, our survival is going to be at stake, not accumulation. Our rich may not like it, our rulers may not like it, but we are going to have to tame our national obsession with GDP. We are going to have to choose different strategies and pull us back from the tipping point of annihilation. I am now not talking about next year and the year after next. I'm talking about 2 decades, 3 decades is the time when, at the time of our independence, when the perspectives were drawn up for the new independent India, people thought in terms of 2 decades, 3 decades, whether it was industrialization, whether it was democratization. These were long visions. And I just want to return to that for the moment, because I think we are at a very critical time of our existence. Now, what are these multiple strategies? When I say you can't have simple strategies, but you need multiple strategies, the important feature of any solution to our predicted problems is, as I see it, the age of social change or revolution or social engineering is definitely over. Demonstrations, protests, agitations have been confined to relatively small groups and on local national issues. This means that national policies are not being a subject of thought, discussion, or representation. We have seen that globally. Policies today are the instruments of political control. It is in this constrained environment that we need to identify what sort of direction we should follow to effect change. We should at least be clear about what we would like to do. So a multiple strategy let me go back to that word, multiple strategy is one that is not guided by ideology, because they are need to help us survive. These are strategies that have multiple ways to improve our chances of survival, to improve our chances of making our life less uncertain. Every climate watching scientist has been warning us to adopt such strategies. And I shall just talk about two of them, which I regard as being the most crucial for the time of this talk. So the difference for the future policies can be seen in the presence of great flexibility, great multiplicity, and the absence of ideology, which will become a matter of personal conviction rather than social imperative. I shall give you the two examples. The first multiple strategy is to change the basic architecture of our governance, which means we move towards decentralization. We have to move away from an inefficient system of centralized governance towards a more democratic and varied system of governance. It's simply because the nature of problems, the number of problems, the volume of scale of those problems is too vast for some central ruler to be able to understand them and deal with them. It's inefficient because today the citizen engages with their government only once in 5 years. Citizens in the future, citizens, we have to save ourselves. We have to make our own lives less uncertain. We have to interact daily amongst ourselves and with those who rule us. This new architecture of government, I shall call it mesh government, if you like. It's like a net. Instead of being a centralized system, and I shall illustrate these at the end of the talk, it becomes a mesh, like a net stretching over our entire country or planet. It's nothing new to imagine stretching a mesh, which we started, after all, we started, in India, we started this 30 years ago. In 1992, our parliament passed the 73rd and 74th amendments for greater autonomy of panchayats and municipalities. This strategy, we need to go back to it and revive it. It's in the Constitution. By extending and stretching a new mesh system across the country to begin with the first of what I would call these multiple strategies. But this is not some idealistic romantic proposal. We're discussing with each other survival strategy. To begin making the mesh of governance, we can begin with our 766 districts, which are assembled together that make our 29 states. Each district, each municipality, panchayat and block needs to be in a mesh of governance. Imagine for yourself each district, and we're talking about almost 800 of them, being a node, a knot in the mesh, and it depends on its geography, its community, what its purposes are, what it'd like to do, what it's possible to do. Each district node forms a base for a new policy base, which I refer to as the mesh economics. So there's mesh governance, there's mesh economics, and this deals with food production, storage, distribution, health, savings, etc., at the district level for each family in each district across all our communities. If all our families do not come within the network of governance and concern and care and documenting of production, consumption, we are not going to be able to ride the coming decade. It's no use for us to go to 25 different places and take sample studies and make a general national policy on the result of those sample surveys. We have to distinguish between our societal, economical, and ethnical and racial differences, linguistic differences in our country. When communities have physical and mental differences, mutual efforts can make local governance play a vital role for survival. We need a new arsenal of ideas, operational manuals, and practices, not theories. We have to make an entirely new survival strategies, implement them from the grassroots up, because it is the disaster comes at grassroots level. When COVID comes, it affects you as an individual, as a family member. The policy is not going to help me. So I'm proposing let's say, different meshes. There's mesh governance. That's how you represent each other locally. There's mesh economics, how you deal with production, saving at the local level. There's mesh urbanization. What is the dominance of the mega city has to begin to disappear. And then there's mesh social security. How do you look after health and medical facilities for our population? Imagine that this mesh is a digital network. It's an information network. It's not a physical feature. I'm suggesting that these new countrywide information and communication networks allow for these meshes in a distributive manner. So instead of, like, the Aadhaar card is a target card, right? I am controlled and in contact with a central authority to verify my card. So I'm not using the ICT technology. It is when I am in link with the panchayat level that I talk about my difficulties as a farmer, my difficulties as an urban slum dweller, and put across a communication center system with them, that you imagine this mesh network coming to life. You see, for people who have computers and Amazon record accounts, it's not difficult. No, I need a bowl of a packet of cornflakes, so I just tick on the computer and it comes. Now imagine this mesh extending not a one-way system but a two-way system. I'm in a village. I need to sell my wheat. I have the whole network available for me. I don't have to be captured by the agent or the wholesaler. So we have to move towards this process of meshing. Otherwise, there is an iceberg floating towards us. We only see the tip of it. It's going to strike us. You see, some districts need protection from acute droughts. Others need it from freak rivers, floods. Some from coastal storms. Others from urban failures. Some from mass migrations. So that's the first strategy that I have. Multiple strategy that I would like to discuss with you. The second, the first one is about the urgency to survive by decentralization. Let's put it that way. If I put in a word, let us decentralize and survive. The second multiple strategy reassembles the current elite economic system into new systems of gathering, storing, and recovering data, using information sharing, crypto technologies. Mesh economic policies can engage with the communities by centering their shared platforms through digitally shared information. You have to imagine each panchayat has a digital platform. Each municipality has a digital platform. Each block within that municipality has a digital platform as a response center for the citizens who live there. So mesh economic policies can engage with the communities by centering their shared platforms through digital information. The saving circles, which were tried out in Bombay, have been so successful in boosting local level, micro level prosperity and their lives. In the new era, and I call these together protective strategies, every community in a district taken at panchayat or municipal level will have a homepage for the community families with a window through which you can access all data, all people. And this is basically done, and it's a little bit more complex than that. Each family will need to have its own blockchain. We now have absolutely incredible facilities for blockchain making. They are being used only in the crypto coin business. But imagine that each family in our country, apart from the Aadhaar card, will have a blockchain. And that will give you the information that you require for your health, what you would, how you would like to invest your money, how you would like to overproduce and sell to whom you like and find buyers on the net, etc. These are absolutely possible things which are bound to happen actually, because you cannot control in the 21st century large country such as ours from central rule. You see, we have to imagine toolkits being distributed, multiple digital toolkits. Everybody has a phone now. Everybody has computers now. And imagine a situation where at panchayat or municipal level, there's a map of everything, right? So you can, as a user, community user, gain access to maps, locate a panchayat, district, national, global, anything. I could exchange my products with somebody in Chile if I wanted, all right? Because there's a system that will be made available. So these are food items, non-food items, crafts, completely new ways of forming commercial and social relationships to improve their lives, to make them less uncertain. You see, macroeconomics, what we have been used to, has always been used to centrally control national economic activities. But the new reality of mesh information, which I'm suggesting, is dispersed and much more democratic. In the coming future, we cannot live with global warming, social unrest, economic uncertainty, medical uncertainty, and the risk of authoritarianism trying to desperately control this democratization, natural democratization process for survival. We are not in a going to be living in an age where we are going to ring up one number and find a solution to everything. It's not going to be like that. These are multiple dangers and we need multiple solutions to this. So I'm aware, of course, that as we sit in this seminar, that no single discussion or seminar can possibly cover the suicidal trajectory that is now being followed by globally, not only by us. I just want to emphasize that determinism is a fallacy. You cannot say, we'll get to this point, we'll get to this point, we'll get to this point. We are in an age when processes are more important than destinations. It's a futile search looking for utopia and peace. It's a dynamic situation. The real search is for surviving the coming decades and how we can help the poor get better lives. These values were, what I'm talking about is values that were expressed centuries ago in lengthy philosophical discussions. Now, philosophical discussions are something that have now diminished greatly, so I'm just returning to them. We must acknowledge that all human beings are differently made, both physically and mentally. So our problem is, how do we deal with that? The solution that I'm suggesting for a region, for a country, they are no use to us as individuals anymore. So, you know, let me quote you a woman who was immensely poor from a Kalahandi village in Orissa. When she was talked to by a correspondent, this is what she said. She said, my hunger is not only for food, but also for love. I'm scared because we live alone. Now, this is the dimension. I can't address this with a poverty line. Now the time has come, we have the technical sophistications to start addressing human suffering in completely different ways. Because a suffering is a physical condition as well as a mental condition. Both are equally important. So to be poor is to be overwhelmed inseparably by both the mental trauma and the physical trauma. If I give you a house to live in, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of the poor. So suffering, we know, is caused by multiple physical and mental causes. Uncertainty, that means. I come back to that. uncertainty is caused by both physical and mental reasons, which is unique to each person. To deal with that suffering, one person's suffering, we have to distinguish it from the grassroots level. Now, I'm just going to give you 5 slides to summarize what I have just spoken on. If we could have the slides on at this time, thank you. Now we go to the first one. Yeah, here is the diagrammatic difference between a centralized system and a mesh system as I'm advocating. I think this is an easy way to understand it. Let's go to the next one. Imagine each of those nodes in the mesh being, let's say, a panchayat system. This is what I call mesh urbanization. These are the new information nodes that we need between settlements, between panchayats, between villages, between municipalities, between blocks. So these are diagrammatically represented. Next, please. So imagine this is a map of a municipality communication systems, the interactions taking place between families in a panchayat or in a block or in a municipality. I'd like you to, I'm putting these across to you so that I can communicate to you the essence of the idea of how we can start thinking in terms of decentralization, in principle, using a completely different structure for existence. Next, please. Let's have. Now, when I talked about global warming, I gave an example of the disasters waiting us. Here is the predicted coast flooding that is going to take place in India, which eventually, after about a decade, now this again, the time varies. Some are saying 10 years, some are saying 3 years, some are saying 20 years. But the flooding will take place because of the global warming. And I'm just taking you to a final slide of the nature of that urban disaster. The shaded areas in Mumbai are the ones that will be flooded when the oceans rise. So when I talk about uncontrollable disasters waiting us, this is an example of it, and how we have to get access to all those who are going to be suffering and be in communication with them. All right, so that's the sum total of what I'd like to say to you today or discuss with you. Thank you very much for being so patient.
Naina, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I'm here. Thank you.
No, sir, not you, sir. Naina, I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
So before we jump into the Q&As, I have a few observations and a few questions for Romy. And thank you so much for this really thought-provoking dialogue. And today is the third and last day, and I'm sure this will be a great help to our participants who are more than 125 now, and of course many of them are also watching on the Facebook. Now it's a completely new paradigm that you have brought in, and I mean all the issue of processes, where you're focusing on the process. But I have 2 or 3 important observations or questions, because Romy, when you speak about districts being, one of these structured areas of this meshed up, and this also means that you're speaking in that rural urban continuum, kind of stuff. It's not clear segregation. Is it that, what I have been able to observe, or are you just segregating the urban from the rural? But if not, like if district is and you've spoken about 800 districts, but districts are not part of the democratic control. The democratic control comes under, as you have mentioned, 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment. So how do you look at it? Because the district still happens to be run by the administrative structures, bureaucracy-driven structures. So how do you visualize this meshed up structure when you talk about the the continuation of the rural urban, or the linkages, I would say, between the rural and urban. But yeah, it's really a very interesting.
Well, let me
the
say
second part, Rumi, let me just finish off the 2 or 3 coming up. The second part is, why do you not speak about, when you spoke about the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment, which is, I think, not sufficient in the present era. And as you rightly pointed out, I mean, your generation walked 3 miles, so did mine. I mean, same city, same town where we lived for, the same school perhaps. So, my generation, people were also ridiculed if somebody came in a car to the school. But now it's exactly the opposite. So definitely these are changing times. But so is, I think, the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment. I mean, why should we not go into for, some fourth list? I mean, if this meshed up structure has come up, why not a fourth list, where we empower the local governance structures? Are you still, because what will be the governance structures of these meshed up, models? I mean, if I have to understand a model at a micro level, because if even if that experimentation has to be done. And you didn't mention this time, Rohit, because this is what you've always been advocating about, sending the planners down below and a cooling off period of 2 years, and asking them to write plans and helping in this mesh structure. Why did you miss that? Or was it, because that's what you've always been advocating, and I've always been, quoting you time and again. I think that is very, very direly required, because so even if you have to build up this digital information network at the lower level, then you have to build those capacities down below. I mean, the capacities of rural or small, small urban centers. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting presentation, and we definitely have to think out of the box. But and of course, multiple strategies, thing that you've mentioned, I think. So also because we are at the crossroad, the government itself is admitting that the current form of urbanization is not going to help us to ameliorate our problems. But then we never know, I mean, what kind of new format is going to be devised from the center. And again, it's going to come from the center. So yeah, with that, and Nana, let's take Q&As later, maybe.
Can I just briefly, before we move out to other questionnaires, deal in a very quick way with the issues, very, very important issues that you have taken the raised. I think let's talk about the very important distinction you make between administrative and democratic structures. Let us look historically at the fact that we inherited a colonial system which carefully divided administration away from democratization. We took that on lock, stock, and barrel because we found that more convenient to execute in a fresh country. I absolutely agree with you that we cannot actually make any progress, material progress in people's lives, most people's lives, unless the democratic and the administrative centers are coincidental. Now, there are obviously problems with this because we don't have a representative system that is democratic and progressive. We have a democratic system that is conservative, yes, and more interested in stopping change than causing change. Now, in this background, I am suggesting that we have a little time to develop the local, low-level, district-level information systems. I think at the back of my mind will always be the imperative need to coincide the democratic and the administrative systems. Because what has happened is that the administrative system has become a moribund system of exam-oriented people who don't necessarily are a source of great ideas because they are totally cut off from people's lives. They are within their administrative handbooks and laws, etc. And they are administrating the country. And then there is a democratic part of the country, which has absolutely nothing to do with the administration except to use and misuse them. The second question about the 73rd and 74th Amendment is only, I'm only using it as a beginning point, and I will absolutely endorse with you that the mesh system requires a completely different expression of democracy. But we have to see that this has to come from change. We are not going to have a sudden change in this unless there is a war, and that causes change as it always does. Now, as far as the training is concerned, I agree with you that unless there is one progressive state in our amongst the 29, which is willing to change, has the foresight to change, has a stamina which is more than 5 years, and is not worried about its future every 5 years, we have somebody with a vision. They may be able to implement such existing experts, existing bureaucracies being used to retrain them to looking towards the future. All right. So I'll have other questions if there are.
Last word, Rumi. I mean, and that comes, you know, we have I believe you're still in Dharamsala. I've come to Delhi.
It is true.
And we have a new government. What if the new government says and asks you particularly to, you know, though Himachal is hardly urbanized, and we have but that rural-urban continuum, we can easily visualize that. Yeah. So what if they ask you, why don't you write the urban policy, and you not write? I mean, you just command the urban policy in Himachal. What would
I would only ask them to do one thing, which is to democratize the regional governance system. What happens in Himachal is that there are multiple communities living here which are not connected horizontally. So the Kangra people, the people from Kulu Manali, the people from Simla, they're all very, very different people with different problems. And something like the AAP party finds it hard to find any sense in the way Himachal is structured. So they're not able to deal with this. But basically, unless each of these, as a starter, each of these 4 or 5 regions of Himachal become self-governing, i.e. give them money to change. Allow 5 years as a learning process. Let them make mistakes. Everybody has got the state at its heart. Thank you.
Great, Naina, I think you can take the Q&As, please. And Professor Darshini is also waiting for her turn to, I think, speak properly. So we can take, are there a few questions, Naina?
Yes, sir, Fiza will ask the question. Fiza?
Prakash Mehta ji, you can unmute and ask, or Fiza, you can read the questions. Yes, Prakash ji, go on.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very enlightening session. It was very thought-provoking. Sir, you have talked about a whole new paradigm of the mesh system, which is very inspiring. But I see that the bureaucracy at times becomes a real bottleneck. You know, we need to humanize bureaucracy, I would say. An IS officer can, you know, recreate the district and become an instrument of change the way the Constitution of India mandates or aspires. What changes you would suggest our bureaucracy should make? I mean, is there any need to change the training, the whole training, the selection process or something to emerge as an instrument of change the way you envision? So how, what role you see for the bureaucracy in the whole paradigm that you are suggesting?
You see, the idea of retraining them or re-educating them, to me, doesn't have any imperative pressure on it. What we have to do is, we as citizens have to give body to the disasters that are facing us. It is up to the bureaucracy to change, because we are saying we are going towards disaster if you don't change. It is not up to us to tell us what to change. It is up to us to put in front of them the disasters that are awaiting us, climatic, social, economic. And we are asking them, we don't know how you're going to do it, but you are certainly not going to be able to deal with this. And we can give you a prediction that in 5 or 10 years' time, the following is going to be taking place. So it is this pressure of forcing rethinking, which is important, which I am presenting to you, and I'm sure that you understand the nature of the disasters that are awaiting us, but they are slow. So it is up to us to heighten those awareness of that pressure and let bureaucracy and democracy force itself to change to meet that.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering the question and giving us valuable information. I would now like to invite our second expert for the session, Professor Shipra Mitra. Ma'am is Head, Urban Development Department, Institute for Human Development, New Delhi. Ma'am's topic is Resilient Cities for Disaster Management, Role of Local Bodies. Welcome you, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I am.
Yes, ma'am, we can see you now. Ma'am,
Yes, but this screen.
It will come. Yeah, it will come. Ma'am,
yes.
Screen को थोड़ा अपने तरफ कर लें. Yeah, हाँ, yes, well, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for providing me an opportunity to share my thoughts related to this very relevant topic. I am grateful to IMPRI for providing me this opportunity. Yes. Now, this is I will be very specific related to the micro problems that we are facing and how we are going to handle those micro problems. Now, as per the United Nations definition, when we define city, we define it as the set of infrastructures and other structures and buildings that create an environment to serve a population living within a relatively small and confined geographical area. So as the migration takes place from rural to urban, first thing happens is that the space is constrained. That from the large rural area, people are coming to city for different reasons that we are not going to explain. We all know for different reasons, and they come to city for getting the opportunity, for getting employment, better economic facilities. And then first thing is that the land-man ratio is affected. We are getting more and less land per person, and there lies some seeds of disaster that may culminate in later years. So we see that this process of urbanization is inevitable, and it is going to be increase from time to time. So, and we see that this in the whole worldwide, we see that the urbanization is going to increase in a way that the pressure will be especially in the low and middle income countries who do not have much resources to cope with the situation. And the flow of people to the city results in informal settlements, and they look for the land, they look for cheap land to go to settle, and often resulting in the marginal and the hazard-prone areas. That's what they want to, they are settling, and that ultimately resources to results in the overconsumption of natural resources. So the moment that people are coming from rural to city area, there are certain possibilities that are emerging which may lead to problems in future. And when we are talking of disaster, there is a difference between the man-made disaster and the natural disaster that we will talk in course of time. But as we move to cities and more pressure of urbanizations are there, the chances of man-made disaster increases. So, and at the same time, the cities are becoming extremely vulnerable to natural hazards, as my previous respected speaker explained, how we are exposing ourselves to dangers of the coastal flood and other things. Now we see here the main thing that the municipalities who are going to handle the cities, they generally suffer from weak urban governance. And then other problems are there. And then as
Are you
the
sharing
people
the
are,
slides? Ma'am,
hello,
ma'am,
yes,
slides आप share कर रहे हैं? Slides.
I have mailed you.
Should I bring that?
You can't see this?
No, no, ma'am.
Oh,
Share screen करके हाँ, that is what.
हाँ, share screen किया था.
फिर से ma'am, let us try once again. No issue.
I have done the share screen and then
एक बार फिर से try कर लेते हैं ma'am. No issue. Share.
so should I close this?
No, ma'am. You can go to share screen in the center of Zoom, green button. Ma'am, or let me share this. Share it. No problem.
Okay.
I will do that. Yeah.
Okay. So I have closed it.
Okay. Yes. I am bringing it. No problem. You can see, ma'am. Please see.
No.
This. Now you can see
No, I can see only Zoom.
on the screen. Can you see?
Just a minute. Yes.
Okay. I will move. You can say next. Huh?
Here.
Ma'am, I will move the slides.
Just a minute. I can't see it again.
Nana, you are able to see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Acha, how come I'm not able to see it?
Ma'am, come back to Zoom.
Yes.
Now, click on the screen. एक दो बार. But ma'am, you carry on. I will change. I'll keep changing the slides. I'm following you.
Just a minute. It is. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Just a minute. So go on. Just a minute, Arjun. I don't know what has happened here.
Ma'am.
I'm just leaving and joining again.
No, ma'am, no problem. You have your PPT, no? You go on. I will just follow you, no problem.
No, but I can't. I think there is some problem with the connection. I'm just Extremely sorry. There was some problem with my internet connection also.
No problem. That is why screen was not coming. Ma'am, you can see the screen?
I can see the screen.
Okay. Ma'am, you said next, I will keep on changing. Please go ahead.
Okay. So as we are talking about, now we can go to the next slide. Yes. We see that as the urbanization is progressing, we are having several threats to environment, and we have to be very careful from the very beginning in our urbanization policy. Now, as we cannot control urbanization, we have to be equipped with the tools to control the environment. And so that the urbanization, there is no conflict between urbanization and environment. Now, how do we see a resilient city? Resilient city will be that we have to build the resilient city in a way that which are capable of withstanding a disaster with minimum damage to its physical and human communities. So, and then the city should be able to rebound without much difficulty. And then we see that here is a very important role for the local governments, because the competent and accountable local government catering to sustainable urbanization with the participation of all stakeholder groups. So the local government has to extend its area of operation to include people and to be able to foresee the future in relation to the disasters that may come to the city. So, and as we are having the built environment, so we have to think of the constructing good houses which is capable of handling the disaster like earthquake and all. That one has to see, and as the local level that people, the local government has more control on the construction, it is highly imperative for the local government to keep a watch and to control through the activities through policies and other actions. And the major thing is to understand the danger. To understand the danger and developing a strong local information base. We are coming to the IT use. Here is the main important thing is that at the local level, one has to develop a strong information base to take care of the situation. And then we have after that one had to take the steps to protect the city and minimize physical and social loss arising from the disaster. So we can see that this all depends on a very capable and foresightful local government to handle the situation, which are very common worldwide, likely to be very common worldwide. Already it is, and it is going to occupy our thinking space quite a few way. Now, next one, please. So the we see that the minimum thing that the local government can do here is that to organize and sensitize people related to the disaster. And they have we were talking about the constitution amendment laws. We know that the local governments now have authority over the urban planning, and urban planning, construction, supervision, these are all within the purview of the local government. So these things has to be taken very seriously when we want to make a resilient city. Next one. The more important for the local government is that the disasters are often local events. So there are national level disaster management authorities and all, but they cannot really come and help the local situation unless we have a very strong local government there. And this the community has to be sensitized to see that to reduce the disaster risk. We have to think about the disaster risk reduction and sensitize the community against the soil degradation, which is generally become part of many livelihood which we have to be careful to prevent. Next one. Now, it is the, sorry. Now, what are the challenges for the local bodies? So we see that when we are talking about disaster risk reduction, there are several challenges. The main is the financial and human resources scarcity. That the local disaster management needs careful planning, careful mapping, careful information, dissemination of information, the carrying on the activities. For that, the financial scarcity is the major hindrance. And we know that in the Indian context, even after so many years of 74th Amendment, the local bodies are not being empowered in that way so that they can handle things. Some municipal corporations are capable to do it, but not the municipalities in the smaller cities. So the constitution amendment actually has not changed their lot significantly so that they can be can take things on their own. And here they are heavily dependent on the state government and the national government for allocation of fund. Now, in another next comes the inadequate knowledge about disaster risk, because they don't have the adequate amount of technocrat who can advise them continuously. Now, inadequate urban planning is there, and lack of monitoring is a very major problem for the local bodies. The local bodies are issuing the building sanction plan and the completion certificate. And we know in Delhi's case, we see, and everywhere it is the same thing, that when the completion certificate is given, there are certain clauses that has to be fulfilled, whether it is capable of this firefighting thing, whether it is the construction is, the structure is good, the structure is according to the norm, whether the development is according to the master plan norm and guidance. Those things are always overlooked when we are issuing, when the local government issue the construction, the completion certificate to the buildings. And so that when the disaster strikes, the urban planning actually is not being able to prevent it, neither being able to foresee it. And political system, yes, the unstable political system, that one political system devises certain mechanism, which is again totally discarded by the another political system. Now, as we just heard the reference of Himachal Pradesh, now the new political dispensation, how they are going to handle the situation is sometimes it is totally disconnected with the what the previous political system has done. So it is beginning at the new level, at a different level, and that leads to the discontinuity of having a formidable system to manage the disaster. Again, the local bodies do not have the adequate legislative authority in many cases to provide relief to the victims. They have to get order from have to get sanction from the state government, from the national government, from many administrative wings to get into the relief operation directly. And so this the political priority sometimes is not into developing a long-term process as disaster risk reduction. If the political priority is not there, then the local bodies are really handicapped in handling the situation. Next, please. Now, the United Nations tried that developed the guidelines very during this 2010 for making cities resilient. And these are the 10 essentials that they have formulated to be followed irrespective of the political structure, irrespective of the country's cultural and ethnic situation. These are the certain things, these are the 10 fundamentals that need to be developed for having for building a resilient city that will be able to handle the disasters. So you see, and all these fundamentals are very much local bodies' work and local bodies' responsibilities. But along with the state government and the national government, they have to build these fundamentals if we want to build the resilient cities. That is and the effective preparedness that cannot happen in isolation. They have to engage the community, they have to engage the administrative system, the other machinery to build a long-term effective preparedness. Next one. So I will confine my observations to Delhi, because Delhi is facing threat to environment from different angles. Now Delhi is going to add. Delhi is continuously adding around 3.7 lakh persons, and out of them the natural rate of growth is lower than the growth of migration, and this migration will continue. We have prepared an estimate for the master plan 2041, and there we have shown that population will be around 30.8 million in 2041, where the migration also will increase almost in the same way that it is increasing now. There is this growth of NCR has reduced the rate of migration to a certain extent, but in absolute number, Delhi has to accommodate more than 2 lakh migrants every year. There is no respite from that. So Delhi has to prepare itself to accommodate this much of people and to provide them a quality of life along with other infrastructure. Now, they say the Delhi is one of the richest states in India. Even then, the 10% of total population are living in slums and jhuggi-jhupris. So, and the solid waste management is a very gray area in Delhi, where we see that the huge amount of solid waste are generated per day in the capital, and only 52% are processed. So the rest are dumped in the landfills, increasing their height and causing several environmental disasters. Now the forest cover of Delhi also is not up to the mark, and the hazardous waste generation also is very, very high. So Delhi is facing the environmental threat from many corners. Many of them are actually municipal jobs which has not been done properly. Next one, please. Next one. So we see, and these continue, the disaster risk continue in Delhi because of the down of the water level is down, and this water level, as it goes down, it has the risk of the land subsidence. And in the airport area, even in the Noida area, it has been estimated that it is running a risk of land subsidence due to the insufficient recharge of the groundwater. And it is only we are focusing on rainwater harvesting, but it is only 20% recharge in the groundwater. And the Yamuna is carrying so much of pollution in Delhi that it is only 2% of the length comes to Delhi. It is only the 2% of length of the total river, and it accounts for 76% of the total pollution load of the river. So you see that everywhere that Delhi is definitely has not become a resilient city, at least till now, though it aspires to be a global city. Next one, please. And the risk and vulnerability of Delhi comes both from the natural disaster and from the man-made disaster. till now we have talked about the mostly man-made disaster, that is the danger that we are living in. And the natural disaster also, because of the topography of Delhi, is also quite large. We are in the seismic zone 4. So, and even a few years back, the buildings have not been constructed into the earthquake resistance mode. So if there is a really serious earthquake, so Delhi, it is very difficult for the national capital to cope with that kind of severity of the earthquakes. There are some stray events, like in Hatko did a techno-physical survey, and they did construct some houses in Odisha to make it this wind-proof and disaster-proof, and those houses are becoming a success. But they're becoming a success, but Delhi has not taken lessons from that till very recently. Now the awareness is there, but it will go a long way to really make our constructions earthquake resistant. So when we are talking of this earthquake disaster, it depends on the sufficiently large magnitude, which there is a danger in Delhi that sometimes it can be up to 6, 7 magnitude in the Richter scale. Also, Delhi can face. So there is a chance of a very large magnitude of earthquake. And the disaster becomes more when it is in a close population center. And Delhi, having the highest density in India, the urban density also is very high, and total density also is very high. So one can imagine the impact of disaster like earthquake when it happens in Delhi in a serious way, for which we have no preparation till now. Yeah, next one. Then another disaster is the flood, and it has the and here also the flood is more or less, the flooding is caused by the man-made mistakes. It is not, we cannot say it's a natural thing. It's a man-made mistake at various level. Sometimes it is the release of excess water from the dams upstream. Sometimes this the low level land has been developed, has been constructed into roads and bridges and other things, leaving very little area for the low-lying areas to absorb the excess water, and it causes flash flood. Then the city's major drains, if the drains that release their water in Delhi in the river Jamuna, more or less untreated, and if they are not cleared, if they are not cleaned, if there is no desilting, then the river actually flows back. So there is a backflow from these drains, which are flooding the neighboring colonies and causing many diseases. So this is here is also some this careful administration and a visionary local body could prevent many of the floods, which has not been done in Delhi. Next one. So the fire hazards is another very serious hazard that is part of the state disaster management plan. When they have prepared the profile of Delhi, they have said that it is very dangerous of various ways, again because of the short-sightedness of the municipality, the callousness in releasing the completion certificate. So the short circuit and the illegal tapping, they are all happen in the city, because we know almost 70% of Delhi is of unauthorized construction and informal development. So that and that thereby lies the danger of the danger related to short circuitness and the fire disaster. And various committees have recommended several times to lay the underground cables, which are not being done till now. And it is the industries also, they want to cut their cost, and they go for this short ways of taking electric connection, having the great hazards, resulting in great hazards in the city. Next one, please. So, and there are economic hazards also, the hazards related to the economic activities and the informal growth. There is no control on the informal growth, though we are having a master plan since 1960s, that we have not been able to check the informal growth, and that results in several kinds of vulnerability affecting the city life. The industry, as I told, that because of the cost cutting measures, the industry storage and everything are kept in a very much unhygienic way and very risky way, overlooked by the municipality, because there is no monitoring of these areas, no monitoring of any economic activity to see how it is getting done and how it is affecting the city life. So hotel, restaurants, all we see that several instances of fire we have seen because of this uncontrolled urbanization activity and uncontrolled economic activities. No, see, and to that adds the narrow lanes and all, where it is very difficult even for the fire engines, the fire engines to move into certain cities. When the municipalities bifurcated, this was one of the major complaints of the East Delhi municipality, that there are so many narrow lanes, it is impossible to enter those lanes in emergency. In case of health emergency, in case of fire emergency, the roads will just the roads are not there. Yes, next one. So we see that now I will just give one example of New Delhi Municipal Council to show that if you have the resources, then you can really do many things, and you can think of many planning that you can implement that also, and you can have your disaster preparedness. Mind you that Delhi, now that the MCD is again unified, so we have 3 municipalities in Delhi, and MCD is the only one fully elected body and the most inefficient. NDMC is not at all elected. It is a fully nominated body, totally supported by the central government, and the Delhi Cantonment Board also partly elected councillors are there and supported by the under the Ministry of Defence. Now you see the NDMC has been selected at smart city, and as it has been selected as smart city, it has been given certain financial resources. There are around more than 100 projects related to the smart cities, of which they have been able to complete 85 projects related to roads, related to infrastructure, related to IT expansion and all. So it is the only area where we have that they don't release their waste to landfill, zero dumping in landfill. So they 100% waste collection and 100% processing through their own sewage treatment plants in their area, and they are increasing capacity. They are using it in a waste to energy, waste to manure, and all kinds of uses are there. Now, and in NDMCs, another advantage of NDMC is that it is very restricted area, though it still has some jhuggi-jhupris, but it is still more or less restricted area. Its population is around 2 lakh, a little more than 2 lakh. So, and that is why its burden is much less, and its per capita revenue is highest among the all the 3 civic bodies. So, and it is mainly, it does not depend on the property tax. Its main earning is the earning from the electricity duty, not from the property tax, because property tax cannot raise also, as most of the area is lived by the government quarters. So only in some commercial sector it can raise in the Connaught Place area, it can raise the property tax, but it is not raising the property tax because it is more or less maintaining a surplus revenue situation and managing its activity. So these are the some of the achievements that it has been able to do during the course of operation. Next one. Now, it is that one of the requirement of the smart city is that to use technology as far as possible, and NDMC is going in that way. So it is going to total digitalization, all the properties, land, households, it is on the way of total digitization. And during COVID period, it is the digitization which made helped NDMC to manage the disaster. And at that time, as a fallout of the COVID, this education system went online. So, and this they are continuing even now, and they plan to continue this with all the children, mainly the children. They run around 50 schools, mainly in the bastis and Jugi Jhupri areas. They all the schools they want to digitize, and it is as they are preparing for their medical emergency, they have prepared for their educational emergency also, which is continuing. So there are different, and they are trying to extend the digitization to as many areas as possible, including the quality coaching for competitive exams. And they for the transport, they are now acquiring electric cars only. They are all officials or government uses. They do not have any petrol cars, no new contract for the petrol or diesel cars, and they are increasing their e-charging stations. So this is they are going in a big way to improve their environment and the quality of life. Next one. So there are some different, these are different measures that they are using, and even the performance appraisal report, that also they have started making it online so that it becomes transparent for their employees and for their employers. So e-governance is their main plan, for which they are increasing. There are they want to make it 100%. They want to make 100% e-governance from every area, from every aspect, so that even all their services, the citizens can get through the e-governance with a single login. And every municipal services that is possible, that has now come under the e-governance. Next one. So now this is they have started that retrofitting work to make the NDMC high-rise buildings safe for seismic effects. This is what they have started. And then the modern health system, medical services, they are going aggressively pursuing this health area to make their hospitals all digital survey. And there is an integrated command and control system that monitors every service, even including the garbage, sanitation, the sweepers, their movement, their where they are in different wards, where they are located in different zones, that they also can control through the integrated command and control system. And the natural resource conservation, they are looking into. Disaster management group, there is a disaster management group that swings into action, mainly the NDMC area. The disaster that they manage is that the COVID, and these areas are not flood prone also, and they have not been affected by any serious seismic effect till now, but they are increasing their preparedness. Yeah, next one.
Ma'am, if you can wrap quickly.
Yes, so we see that this is that we see that I mean that my point was in relation of NDMC is that if you have the financial resources, then you can do many things at the local level, which is not possible to do by other municipalities. Even MCD, as the richest, one of the richest second richest corporation in India. They have not been able to do that because of the lots of political interference, as was mentioned by my respected previous speaker, that there is a conflict between the administration and the political dispensations, which NDMC does not have. So at local level, there are some framework that we have prepared in that what the local government can do to become a resilient city. That is mainly the preparing the vulnerability atlas. The district administration will be the focal point. Now you see, in our system of disaster management, district administration is the focal point from the administrative point of view. But with that, one has to synchronize the local government also, the local government also, so that there is no contradiction between the working of the district administration and the local body, and there is free exchange of information. That is why they have to be the effective instruments. Yeah, next one. I think I don't have much. Only I have talked about the framework here. Next one. Yes. So these are the micro level planning that I have mentioned, that in the local level one has to do, one has to take up in order to make a resilient city. Yeah, next one. Yes. So this is the one have this where we just have to think about the distinction that there must be some structural disaster risk management procedure and some non-structural. So and the vulnerability mapping, this citizens participation, these are all related to this non-structural management, and along with the main structural physical infrastructure that can minimize the impact of the disaster. Yeah. This is how the macro planning, I don't have to repeat it. One can see that at every level, the cities has to prepare, the local government need to prepare all these things. This is already written. You can go through it and see that that proper monitoring at the local level is required through each of the steps. And there must be the ICT enable management. The ICT must be used in extensively. So yeah. So what I am observing here is that it is not only decentralization that helps the local bodies. We have seen many cases that decentralization has not become effective because of the lack of finance and the lack of technology, lack of experts. So the local bodies actually are heavily dependent on the government grants and government effectiveness to handle this disaster. They have not become the independent unit of self-governance. So as we are building the resilient city, we have to see how one can empower the local bodies. It is only a structure like NDMC that have been able to be very, very successful, which does not have any political interference. But that is not the correct way. One has to make our political dispensation very, very sensitive to all these issues, and there must be thoroughly monitoring by the citizens group to make the local body effective to build a resilient city. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable information. Now I would like to invite our third expert, Professor Darshini Mahadevia. Ma'am is Associate Dean, Arts and Professor, Social Science, School of Arts and Science, Ahmedabad University, Ahmedabad. Ma'am's topic is Cities, Housing, Disaster and Resilience. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you.
Yes, thank you. I'll just try and share my screen. While I do that, I will have to apologize to the participants because I have another meeting and I leave at 1:15 because I think my schedule was till 1 o'clock. Can you see the screen?
We can see, ma'am. You can go full screen. Yes. Perfect. Yes, ma'am.
So to my presentation is going to be very short. We have heard a macro level presentation from Professor Dr. Shipra Moitra. I'm just going to focus on housing, disaster resilient housing, or how housing matters in the actions for resilience. This housing is a very, very important aspect of resilience because almost half the city is under housing. Housing is a basic necessity for people, and so we need to weave up disaster resilience from the bottom up. Whatever Dr. Shipra Moitra said is done at the city level, but at the local level within the communities, housing becomes very important aspect of intervention. And I'm going to today share some of my research findings with regards to housing on how that matters at the local level. I want to start with the framing of how resilience, how disaster impacts. It's not really a very simple pathway to disaster impacts felt at the local level. Many of you would have seen this. This is out of the IPCC's Working Group 2 report from the assessment report 5, which is basically a publication of 2014. The new IPCC report has moved ahead, and I'll be showing that diagram at the end of how housing figures in the entire resilience activity. What this diagram tells that there are the hazards often is a given thing, and hazards are on account of multiple reasons, including climate change. But the risks to the community and its impacts are based on how vulnerable the community is and what is the extent of exposure. Now, housing, the risk to the community is linked to socioeconomic situation, socioeconomic pathways selected by the government. In India, for example, if we look at how COVID-19 pandemic was managed, different state governments have had very different responses to managing COVID. Some states did better than the other states, and that's what is being referred to here as socioeconomic pathways. Adaptation and mitigation actions at the local level. Adaptation actions at the local level need to start with the housing interventions, and I will share our own field research in this regards. And governance, a lot of discussion on urban local governance we heard in the last presentation of capabilities of local bodies in India to deal with various dimensions of development as well, and including disasters. So this is the framing, and housing actually figures both in terms of exposure to the hazard, and it figures also at the adaptation level. What I found in the research that I have done on housing, that housing is an important social protection measure. It protects against natural elements, we all know, historically from time immemorial. It protects against heavy rains. Now, it also protects against heat and extreme heat, and I'll show you some data on what the findings are from different kind of housing interventions. Even in COVID-19 pandemic, when it was said that one needs to quarantine and self-isolate, housing became the central focus of controlling the spread of this pandemic. The question arose of when there is housing, no housing, of people who don't have access to housing or adequate housing, what is the implication and how such pandemics need to be addressed in such situation. What we have found, and I present the evidence on this, that in our study in Ahmedabad, which has been experiencing very high increase in average heat in months of May and June since last 30 years now, there's a published paper in Environment and Urbanization Asia on this. But we found that Pakka housing gives better, higher protection in contrast to informal housing, particularly informal housing which is semi-Pakka with GI sheets, asbestos sheets, or one of those kind of roofing elements. However, it's going to be an issue to transit entire informal housing spectrum and in Indian context to formal housing, and we'll need intermediate solutions of adaptation to various disasters. The immediate one that we'll have to deal with urgency is increased episodes of heat. When I'm referring to housing, I'm talking about shelter plus basic services plus interventions at the neighborhood level. So this is a recent, this is the paper which is to come out in urban India. This tells us the density map. This is Ahmedabad city. Higher, I hope you can see the colors, that is dark colors indicate higher density. The map title crowding is number of households which are one-room dwelling units. This is 2011 census data. And you can see that in certain parts of the city, this is south area, southern area where large population of low-income households is concentrated, and this part is the central walled city area. What we find in Ahmedabad, this is an aggregate incidence of or density of COVID-19 infections. We must remember that these are reported infections and not actual infections, and it started with the most dense area of the city, that central part of Ahmedabad city, and then it spread to rest of the parts of Ahmedabad city, which is the early research on COVID-19 pandemic and its link to urban morphology did bring out the fact that it did start in areas which were more dense. However, later on, cities made efforts to deal with it. For example, Bombay's Dharavi slums management of COVID pandemic is a very celebrated case where specific efforts were made to see that the COVID spread could be controlled in Dharavi, which has one of the highest population and household density among all cities in the world. This is the kind of housing where significant proportion of population live, and they face during summer a double whammy of heat waves, water scarcity, and if they are working in occupations which are outdoor occupations such as a construction worker, as shown here, their vulnerability to heat waves increases. In cities, the heat wave and what's called in literature urban heat island effects have got compounded because due to reduced green cover and higher paved surfaces. Now, I want to share a research that we did in 2018, which is a primary survey of about 870 households in Ahmedabad, and these are predominantly low-income households. We selected 3 kinds of housing. Formal housing, largely at that time, this were PSUP housing because PMAY was still under construction and not given for occupation. The middle is a slum or a Charlie, which is sort of quasi-legal in an Ahmedabad context. And the last is pavement dwellings with GI sheets, etc. And you can see that in the pavement dwellings, the temperature on road was as high as, let's say, 55 degrees centigrade. The red line indicates what was the average of the city. So first thing that you see, that except a settlement, which is the last settlement, S26, all other settlements that we covered experience on-road temperature, which is far, far higher, sometimes higher by 15 degrees centigrade than the average of the city. which means that there are localized impacts of excess heat, and urban heat island effects vary by the city's morphology. It's a common sort of commonsensical understanding that the extent of heat recorded is much higher in industrial areas than in residential areas, in areas where there are more green cover versus areas which do not have green cover, and so on. So we had covered low-income settlements, which are largely in east of Ahmedabad, and east of Ahmedabad is an industrial area in Ahmedabad city. And that's why you see that all the settlements had experienced the outside temperature in all the study areas was much higher than the average of the city. The second gray line is the temperature that is experienced within the house of the surveyed households. The green band that you see is the thermal comfort band. Anything above that requires actions to cool temperatures inside the house. And you see that, except I think some of the settlements which are in the formal housing, where households did fit into the thermal comfort band, in the informal housing, all the households experience temperature within the house which is higher than the thermal comfort band of 24 degree to 35 degrees centigrade, which means if I can summarize, informal housing and low-income housing, the residents of the informal housing and low-income housing do feel more temperatures within their house than the formal house. Two, if these are pavement dwellings, and pavement dwellings are the ones that are shown in the earlier picture, are of either galvanized iron sheets or asbestos sheets or even cement sheets, the temperatures felt inside the house are higher. In fact, in settlement S2, the temperature felt outside is about 54 degrees centigrade and inside is 53 degrees centigrade. So we need to plan housing for such excessive heat impacts. We should not be planning housing for temperatures which are average temperatures of the city. In this case, the average temperature recorded for about the period of study was about 39 degrees centigrade. And so this is my last slide. If we move into, and this is a slide about multiple hazard resilience. Now, in 2020, when we had lockdown on account of COVID-19 pandemic, so this COVID-19 pandemic was one of the disaster which strikes the world. I think it's every century or so, because 2018, 2019, we had Spanish influenza, as it was called. I have some information on the influenza flu experienced in Ahmedabad city in some of the history books, but Indian cities were also very badly hit by that the pandemic. And almost after a century, we get the new pandemic, which is an airborne pandemic, and we are going to expect many such future impacts going forward on account of multiple uncertainties related to climate. And hence, in the summer of 2020, what was experienced was that when the order was given to lockdown and people forced to live within the household, in low-income housing, it was a tremendous amount of stress, because firstly, as I had shown the earlier picture of many households living in one-room units, there's extensive crowding within, and even in that situation, if one person gets infected, the entire household gets impacted. At the same time, in the informal housing, especially of the kind that does not have a good roof, and there's transmission of heat from the roof into the house, in that situation, it was a situation of multiple hazards. We also know that during pandemic, there was cyclone in West Bengal and Kolkata was affected and so on. Under these situations, we need to be also thinking about multiple simultaneous hazards and think about resilience. And housing, adaptive housing, plays a very important role in reducing exposure to the hazard. And this is a diagram of how to build resilience to compound hazards. Firstly, I mean, hazard reduction is a long-term agenda, which is linked to the climate change agenda. But one can reduce the vulnerability of population through economic interventions, that is livelihood security, and also health security. Planning, as Shipra has talked about a lot on the planning. She talked about in governance or in planning, we should be thinking about how cities are to be governed. And housing is important for adaptive actions. So this is what is the conceptualization. And I would like to submit that we do not have any generalized way forward. There is going to be specific localized solutions to the way we move forward in adaptive housing. Something that I haven't put in the slide, but I would like to say is that, let me just forget, I'll stop sharing. What I would like to say in conclusion is that we have just concluded, last summer we undertook another study of picked up houses where there were cool roof interventions to reduce internal temperatures. And we did find, and we went and did survey of two things. What are the temperatures experienced inside the house? What was the temperature outside? And how did the housing materials matter in terms of bringing difference inside the house? And what we find is that obviously cool roofs led to decrease in temperature inside the house by about 2 degrees centigrade. But cool roofs are also not of one kind. There are multiple kinds of cool roofs. Either there is a mod roof that is being put, which is of a material that reduces heat transfusion into the house, or else there are white paints put on roofs which will radiate out, or there's a higher albedo effect on account of white roofs, or people tend to put artificial ceiling below the roof to reduce the heat transfer. And so when there is a modified roof which is made of cardboard and other matter, there is a much higher level of control of heat, whereas when you put a white paint, it offers the least impact internally. And so the solutions lie in this multiple continuum of various solutions. In our study, we also find that temperature inside the house is lower if there's a tree nearby, if there is a cross ventilation, if the ceiling height is higher. And if we want to think about housing for disaster resilience, we'll need to think about various parameters of housing that would increase resilience at the household level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable information. Now I would like to invite our fourth expert, Mr. Sameer Unhale. Sir is Mission Director at Maharashtra Urban Development Mission Directorate, Swachh Maharashtra Mission Urban, and visiting Senior Fellow at IMPRI. Sir's topic is Practitioners' Perspective on Disaster, Housing, and City Governance. We welcome you, sir, and over to you.
Over to you. Namaskar. First of all, I must extend my greeting to IMPRI and NIDM for conducting this very important training module, a capacity building module for us. because continuous capacity building, I think, is going to be very important. And sharing the ideas with each other, either as a knowledge product or using latest technologies available, I think is going to be very, very crucial, because whenever a disaster strikes, the first thing it makes is try to entirely engulf our moods and emotions, and thinking gets clouded. And therefore, there's a lot of confusion can happen, and a lot of damage essentially happens because of this confusion. And therefore, when we think of any, when we are talking of resilience of cities, resilience of city infrastructure, I think it's very important that the responses of the city's institutions, the city's processes, the behaviors that is linked with the citizens forms a very important part of making the city resilient in case of disasters. I think, as we know, in the disasters management methodology or framework, disasters can be man-made. It could be a case like the rioting or war-like scenarios. It could be medical disasters, the way we COVID hit us maybe 2 years back. And there are, of course, rains in our part of country where monsoons is very high, unpredictable, getting unpredictable day by day. So I think it is going to be very important for the cities, the municipalities, the smart cities, the other institutions who are working within the urban spaces of India. Could be the disaster management cells, the disaster management authorities, the planning authorities, the development authorities, the metro, the mobility infrastructure. So in fact, the cities are having many multiple institutions working together. And I think that's going to be inevitable, in a way also welcome, because we are looking for greater professionalism and greater expertise in handling the Indian urban situation scenario. And therefore, we also will have to learn and also will have to plan as to how the multiple institutions which are working within the cities will connect with each other, will try to, are they going to share resources? Are they going to share data? Are they going to share the practices, the decision making, the consultation, the communication of decision making? I think is very, very important, especially in this framework of making the cities resilient, that the multiple institutions that operate in the Indian urban spaces will have to acknowledge, will have to communicate with each other, and probably an institutional mechanism will have to be established for greater coherence and communication. I think one of the examples that I could share was during the COVID times, and I think it's also not Mumbai, but also many other metropolitan or mega cities or million-plus cities, as we call them, of creating a disaster response system for the framework when COVID hit us very unexpectedly, with the ferocity, with the speed and exponential speed it was attacking the cities there. So I think as far as the Disaster Management Act is concerned, I think the Disaster Management Act is still, it is a district collector or a district magistrate centric act. And I think the realities of Indian demographic shifts we are seeing, the urbanization trends we are seeing, I think there are many major urban areas in which the institution of district collector, in a way, is more of a maybe a land revenue record keeping agency rather than the main agencies, because in any municipal corporation or a metropolitan area, the entire infrastructure lies with the urban local bodies or with the parastatals, and therefore a municipal commissioner will have to be acknowledged, in my opinion, as an important officer of the act. That the municipal commissioner also will have to be given the powers in the Disaster Management Act. In these cases, when we are talking of making the cities resilient, it is not to say that the municipal commissioner is not mentioned. It is mentioned, but the requisite powers he can use is only of taking the normal committee framework, or then exercise the powers if given by the state government or the central or the district collector. So I think this, in the view of increasing urbanization and the vulnerability of Indian cities to the disasters that it might face in various nature, I think this could be considered on making the municipal commissioner or the chief officer or executive officer of the smaller urban local body as the officer of the Act of Disaster Management. I think that could be considered. Thirdly, I felt, after this institutional, the communications and coherence, the way example I was talking was that of, COVID responses when there were a lot of ambulances to be made available, the supply of oxygen, the setting up of COVID centers, the isolation centers, the procurement of ventilators and ensuring that they're deployed. I think these cases really not, I think we have to learn, we have to document, we have to learn, there has to be a greater debriefing on the experiences of COVID so that it gets documented properly. In fact, it might not be inappropriate to state that this, the Spanish flu, as it was called, when it struck India in 1918, almost 100 years back, I think there's very little written officially available or taught to us into colleges or history books that India was struck with such ferocity by the Spanish flu in the then colonial rule that there was tremendous loss of life, especially in the part which I come in. Almost every alternate house had lost a person in the Spanish flu in 1918 and 1920, 100 years back. But there isn't any documentation available. I don't know what could be the reasons for that. But the lessons I think we should learn is that it's a accumulated knowledge and wisdom that comes up of the various experiences, when the institutions are interacting, the cities are interacting, reacting to maybe the disasters and various such instances, events. This documentation, I believe, is very important, and it will help. It will go a long way in making our cities resilient, because this knowledge will be available, and I think it could be developed into various SOPs and improvement of the SOPs. Along with the increasing incidences of disaster-like events, I think it's accepted, it's acknowledged that maybe due to the carbon footprint that is being generated, the general issues of climate change, the unpredictability of climate, and with general other geopolitical scenarios, I believe the ability of the cities to respond these situations and in that sense make the city resilient, I believe is going to be a very, very important factor, and probably important issue in next decade or so. And making these cities resilient involves, in my opinion, a very, very important part of citizens' engagement or citizens' participation and citizens' behavior in these kinds of scenarios. I think another important thing that needs to be learned during COVID times. I mean, I'm referring to COVID because that was one of that is something that is still very fresh in our memories, and something which could give us certain lessons when we are talking of making cities resilient in the disaster management framework. So during the COVID times, I believe, as was the case with setting up the COVID centers or managing the medicines and the other issues like oxygen and ambulances and etc. We also know that when we shift the framework of engagement from the psychological aspect, as it said, that it is sometimes managing a mass hysteria that gets generated in disaster-like scenarios, especially in the urban area, is spreads like wildfire, and managing these kind of I don't know what should I call it. Should I call it the mass hysteria or the fear that generates? It becomes a very important part to be acknowledged, and then the cities will have to learn, how to engage with these kind of fears, how to engage with mass hysterias, how to respond to them. What could be the mechanism of the proper communication? So I think one of the things which we learned was there was a constant official communication from the government side, both at central, state, and even the urban local bodies and the rural local bodies and maybe the field administration. They are trying to convey the facts as regularly as possible. But I believe we will have to be much more, shall we say, innovative, and we will have to depend more and more on technology and all available possible means of communicating the proper facts, because the historical behavior, where it's not making any value judgment, but it's a fact that city will have to consider if it truly wants to be resilient or in case of any disaster, that how are we going to connect with the citizens, and therefore there has to be a regular engagements with citizens in this context of disaster management. We do have yearly events happening, but probably we need to reach out to probably schools, higher education, colleges, maybe all the offices, all the markets, more frequently, trying to tell them that in case of any such event of disaster, it could be heavy rains, it could be maybe landslide, it could be a number of other events that the Disaster Management Act recognizes. What exactly should you and me and your neighbor or your family or your office goers or your friends should be doing? I think we will have to be more, I do remember that in probably earlier times, there was at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the case maybe, there is to be a civil defense siren going on every day probably. It was the remnants of maybe the 6th or the 7th decade in which the air warning were given, and therefore this system of giving air sirens or maybe warnings by every day was there, but now it has been stopped. But I think the lesson that we need to learn is that we will have to make the disaster responses, the mechanism, the responses on disasters will have to be more widely disseminated. It will have to be part of our culture actually, day-to-day functioning also, that in case what should be happening, and as it is often said that we have to be ready for disaster always. It's not that when disaster strikes at you, then you start thinking, running here and there, and you don't know what to do. And more importantly, we will never know how the citizens or the masses will respond to what we are looking at. So I think when we are looking at making the city resilient, I feel another, apart from what municipalities do at the city level, I think the smart cities and the development authorities, along with the traffic police, and the mobility, I mean, maybe it might be the metros or the railways or the city transport, even private transport. So their interaction and cohesion is going to be very important. And then how to make this happen is a challenge that we'll be having. And we will have to acknowledge that there are not going to be any easy answers. We can always share our experiences, but I don't think we can cut paste any solution of any city to any other city or any other country. And therefore, this immersion wisdom is a process that will have to be continually kept alive. And therefore, we will have to engage, interact with the city, with the community, within the community more frequently than probably what we are thinking of. And this, I think, will have to be taken. Not only it can't, the cities and the government is not run just by clerks and bureaucrats or technocrats. We will have to get the political leadership with us. We'll have to get the community organization with us. We'll have to get the media with us. And another lesson I think we learned from COVID times was any disaster can be overtaken, can be overcome only and only if all the actors come together, take their bit, and there is no overlaps and gaps and counter functioning. This also, I think, is going to be an important lesson for the coming decade, especially when we are thinking of making the cities resilient in case of disaster striking there. That there will have to be very continuous engagement, and also the communication among the various players, and taking this political leadership, taking the community leadership, taking the media leadership, taking the local volunteers, the college going students, even the various resident welfare associations, the various business associations, maybe the traffic, taxi and rickshaw association, the entire social capital, as one puts, the city will have to be engaged, and therefore we will have to keep this culture of resilience in case of disaster striking cities more alive. And therefore, the event that we are talking of, the current the engagement, what the IMPRI is doing, I think is required more prominently, and I think more frequently, and also more and more in local languages with our all the wherever the cities are. Another important thing, of course, is how to tide over the destruction of property and life is something that will have to be learned, because whenever there are, if even God forbid, but when we are talking anything in disaster management framework, then we have to consider various possibilities, and we also have to consider black swan events if at all they come. And the preparedness of that, I think, will have to be thought of. Of course, the Disaster Management Act is old, and in fact, we are seeing many such actions happening. But we will have to take it to the citizens much more strongly and much more frequently. I think vis-a-vis housing, especially in cities where the density is very high, the disaster striking, I have to say the physical disaster striking cities and the damage it can create. It could be a war-like scenario, it could be earthquake, it could be landslides, it could be flooding. I think in that cases, making the infrastructure of the city resilient is very important. And when I say resilient, it essentially means it doesn't stop from functioning. It performs the functions it is supposed to provide for the cities. The services that infrastructure gives to the cities needs to be around. It might be electric supply, it might be the supply, it might be the mobile network. Of course, we know we are talking of a lot of IoT-based and IT-led initiatives even in disaster management. But if the basic network goes off, then the first thing probably, as many times it has been noticed either in cyclones or in other such heavy rainfall, that the mobile network, if it goes off, then we really don't know what to do. So therefore, in fact, there is an example that I could share. It was that we had a very heavy rainfall in the place where I worked earlier, and the entire train was at danger of getting flooded and had to be evacuated at the midst of the night. And because the network was a problem, and luckily there was a experience of a best practice I think I should be sharing here, that the Thane Municipal Corporation in the Mumbai Metro region has its own Thane Disaster Relief Force, the Rescue Force, TDRF, as the way we have NDRF or SDRF at the states. The city has a own Disaster Relief Force, the TDRF. This was an innovation done at the city of Thane, and I think it deserves to be replicated in other cities wherever it is possible, that the city also has its own disaster response systems. And the satellite phones that we have purchased, the issue I was mentioning here was precisely that we will have to also take care of new technologies, and we had procured satellite phones for that TDRF force, which was helpful, especially in case of rains, and when moreover when you are going in heavily flooded areas and the entire network or system may not function. In that case, the satellite phones were also helpful. So city innovation of having its own disaster relief force, I think, was something which could be tried. And of course, when we are talking of infrastructure, maybe of mobility, and more importantly, the built infrastructure and the housing, it has to be disaster resilient by the way of building codes and the planning norms. And I think the study of disaster related issues vis-a-vis this master plan is an evolving field, and I think more work will have to be done there. Of course, the floodlines are mentioned. However, the third dimension or the height sector of the cities probably is yet to be fully captured into the making of the master plans. But of course, with more and more digital technologies available, with use of, I think, GIS linked maps, and the entire planning process is not to be taken by satellite maps and GIS maps, even the use of drones. I believe the planning, the city plans and the master plans and the land use planning would be more and more realistic, would be more and more temporally relevant, and also the framework in which when I say that disaster management framework, I think the ethos will have to be made a part of everyday functioning of the city. It's not that we are going to respond to it once a while. It will have to be incorporated in every aspect of running a city. And therefore, the risk management, I think, analysis, which needs to be adopted into the making of infrastructures and housing, and also the other parts of the processes of the city functioning, are, I think, a new thing that needs to be adopted in Indian framework more strongly. It is being done, but I think a risk assessment methodology also will have to be made more strongly be a part of the framework, the urban system that we are running. I think by and large we discuss cities-centric framework when we are talking of disaster management, and what needs to be done if we have to make the cities more and more resilient and responsive and capable of overcoming any shock that a disaster gives. So I must thank IMPRI for this opportunity. I must thank the NGMA for this opportunity of sharing some of the experiences vis-a-vis the cities and the municipalities and the smart cities in view of making the cities resilient to disasters. So thank you, and I will be available for any questions that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your valuable information, sir. Sir, I have a question.
Yes, Nina, go ahead.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. From administrative point of view in India, what are the major bottlenecks and silver lining for urban governance?
Yeah, I think one thing you would realize is that in the broader framework of disaster management, how cities have adopted the framework of disaster management in its functioning, I think is a important thing which has happened. Most of the cities now have their disaster management plans, and it is getting reflected into the governance framework, I think, which is institutionalizing excellence and institutionalizing practices in government is a very important and time-taking activity. And this we are seeing in past couple of, I think for last, the Disaster Management Act came in year 2000, and maybe after 7 to 8 years after that, it is now getting slowly institutionalized in one way or another. And I think that's the important thing that has happened. And I think more and more, it needs to be institutionalized much more. Because I keep on saying that now we are in a phase where we require the institutions and the systems to function excellently and achieve excellence. So one person dependent systems cannot function. Person dependent activities are not to be relied upon. We require the institution, we require the processes, the system to achieve excellence. And this, I think, is going to take much more time and is a major, one of the important opportunities for administration and governance to deliver the results in times of such crisis. I referred to the COVID part much more, I think, extensively in the discussion we had earlier, precisely for the reason to just illustrate and to highlight as to how a disaster management framework can help administration, it can help identify the administrative bottlenecks, and it can also give a modality as to how to institutionalize excellence by way of processes and systems. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, go. Your voice is not coming.
Yeah. So do we have any other question, Amni?
Yes, sir. Fiza has, but Fiza, your audio is not.
I think is the audio fine now? Hello?
Yes, sir.
The audio is okay?
Yes.
Yeah, so should I be repeating it again, or it should be okay?
Yes. No, sir, your audio is fine. Fiza's audio is not working.
Okay.
Fiza, join again. It will work then. Leave and join. Okay. Dinesh Rajpurohit ji, you have a question. You can unmute and ask the question, please. Dinesh ji. Yes, Dinesh ji.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. This is Jaspal Singh. So you explained it in a very good manner, sir. My question was when we speak about the COVID disaster, it's we have seen a multiple layer of support created across the globe. We can say it in India also, we have seen that it was governmental part left, to extend their support. I just need a point of view of yours also on this point. So not just about COVID, but any other disaster, sir.
I think the audio
Hello?
wasn't very clear, so I couldn't, decipher the communication here.
Just
Shall I repeat the question, sir?
yes.
Yeah, I'll repeat it.
I think
Yeah.
could you just,
Sir, my
I
question.
think could you just, have a synopsis of them very small, briefly, what exactly the question is?
The question is, like in COVID time, the participation or support were extended not just by the government agencies or political leaders, but it was by the people itself. I think isn't there a need of such bodies to stay alert in the other disasters that can come up, and the role of government to create a collaboration of such individuals for the future?
Yeah, I think, the Disaster Management Act, which governs these situations in India currently, which is a national act, has provisions of the points which you have mentioned, that there will be an authority, that there will be regular interaction, that there will be capacity building activities, there will be collaborations, there will be, there is a SOPs which are being developed, there are SOPs which have been modified. These SOPs are to be shared. So I think the broader idea that you mentioned is being acknowledged in the Disaster Management Act and the rules which are made thereunder, and the processes which are being to be followed. So I think what you are saying is perfectly in line in view of the Management Act, and I think reaching out to the people much more regularly and much more prominently, I think, is an activity which could be taken up. Yeah.
Is that?
Yes, sir. So my question is, what are the common themes and differences in various disasters for city administration, such as floods, heat waves, fire pandemic, earthquakes, pollution, etc.? I mean, what are the differences and common themes for these disasters?
Actually, one of the basic principles that is followed in disaster management is to ensure that the life is saved first, and of course the property is saved. So saving life and property always is the common objective of any type of disaster that might strike. And as was shared earlier, that the frequency, the intensity is getting a bit different these days, and therefore we will have to be ready to all eventualities, and that can happen only by preparation. It can only by drills and practices, and that needs to get the citizens and volunteer groups as closely involved to any disaster management practices to that. So if when we are in the part where the monsoons are high, especially coastal cities, you have the rain, and if the rainfall coincides with the high tide, it's maybe in like coastal cities like Chennai or maybe Mumbai, then it is a part of a matrix is being developed, that if you have a particular of rainfall, more than that rainfall, which comes 3 hours or 4 hours before the high tide, then there is a probability of flooding occurring in those flood prone areas. So these kind of this has to be a part of, as I said, it is a part of the city culture. It has to be a part of the knowledge of common citizens now, that what are the possibilities, what are the probabilities. We have very often we have the warning system of meteorology fairly advanced now. We have satellite mappings, and therefore the predictions in meteorology in weathers are fairly dependable. Similarly, we will have to develop a system even for disasters. If you're having rainfall, there's a probability of landslide. There's a probability of flooding. If you have got cyclones coming up, then you will have to be ready with the loss of property. And for example, cyclones come, then you have tree falls are very, very prominent, and that leads to the disturbance of the electricity supply and the water supply. So these kind of activities will have to be taken to the people as prominently as possible. Yes, if you are having this kind of situation, there is a probability of these kind of disasters, and these are the precautions that you should be taking. So this kind of reaching to the, we will have to make the disaster management framework a part of the city culture. That's what I was saying by, and it has to go through various, it has to use the social capital of the city, like students, education, NGOs, resident welfare associations, various professional associations will have to be made part of this city resilience of the city to any disaster will come by using the social capital of the city and by greater communication with the citizens. Yeah, so that was, I think, one of the options that we should be having.
Right, we have two more questions, Britika ji and then Dinesh ji.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for your retrospective session. You have partly answered my question, but I still go ahead with the question. As we are witnessing a quantum leap of both disasters and influx of information technology, how can we incorporate lived experiences of survivors from previous disasters for community engagement, helping in the efficient mitigation of disasters and making our cities more resilient?
Dinesh ji, are you able to? You can take
Yeah, I could hear. I think it was.
Can you hear me, sir?
We can hear.
Yes.
Samir sir, we will take one more question. Dinesh ji,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
Sir, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Sir, good afternoon, first of all. Thank you, Samir sir. This was a good session. Sir, I am doing research from Delhi University regarding mobile governance and climate change. So can you elaborate how mobile governance, which is the latest part, we can say, like it's a one step ahead with e-governance. So how would mobile governance would help in the resilience of city urban planning, and also how we can collaborate through mobile governance and take the best practices within the urban cultures? Can you elaborate on this?
Yes, so I think the first part with Madam had asked regarding use of how can we learn the lessons of the earlier disaster and make it a part of our SOPs. I think that was a very relevant question, and I think that can happen only if there is documentation, debriefing, documentation, incorporating that into the SOPs, and greater dissemination of that information by way of various engagements with the citizens. So I think that cycle of debriefing, of learning the lessons, of documenting it, of putting it into the SOPs if that need to be modified, and then following the dissemination route of reaching out to as many associations, as many individuals as possible, so as to learn disseminate the lessons that have been learned. In fact, I had mentioned that during the 1918 Spanish flu that struck India, we will find very little material that is recorded, and I think I don't no one knows what could be the reason. Whether the then colonial administration and colonial governance probably is not shown to be have taken that much of efforts. But in this after this pandemic, I think a lot of documentation has been done. I think these lessons will have to be acknowledged, captured into SOPs, and disseminated more and more frequently. I think that's one route I could think of. I think the second question was very interesting. When the mobile governance and climate change, it's very upcoming field. And we know, as you know, there is a smart city mission happening with Government of India. And as far as in urban context, I can at least say that the smart city mission with the use of integrated command and control centers, and also the various city apps that are coming up, are really helping the cities to achieve resilience in case of disasters that might come out of climate change, way of acknowledging the data that is leading to climate change, number one. Number two, the mitigation measures that are to be taken can also take help of the mobile technologies, because it is something which is closest to the citizens, and therefore it is almost a part of citizen now. So the use of mobile governance by way of city apps in capturing the data of climate change, in acknowledging the changes that are being brought up by our individual actions, and dissemination of information are three verticals into which the mobile governance can help climate change. I can share an example that we did when I was earlier working as CEO for a smart city, where I had a city app, and this app for a city of 2 million, it has 3.5 lakh registered users. That's almost, more than 60% of households of the city are registered on the app. And a lot of communication flow becomes very, very easy when we have so many people registered on the cities. Especially it could be usual routine governance matters, or even I remember when there was a chemical tanker mishap. It was very easy to communicate that with the traffic police and reroute the traffic away from that disaster spot. That is just one of the examples which can happen. In fact, flow of governance, flow of information is the soul of governance. And whatever helps to facilitate the flow of governance is obviously going to help in all the aspects of administration. It has a multiple dimensions on which mobile governance can function. We again had done a similarly very small exercise, administrative exercise really, of trying to identify the social divide, the matter of digital inclusion, and the accessibility of mobile instruments, accessibility of the mobile technologies that are there. And I think results were quite interesting, and I believe that mobile governance is going to be the peculiar governance of the third decade. I think it's easy for us to reach to the citizens, and I see tremendous potential in the use of mobile technologies on all aspects of governance, including that might arise out of climate change. So thanks a lot for a very good question.
Thank you. So we have one last question by Prakashji. Prakashji, please.
Yes. Thank you, sir, for a very enlightening presentation. I think you are pointing at knowledge management. We need to have a sober and robust knowledge management system, and where we can learn the lessons and learn from the lessons learned. Even if you go to any municipal office or any government office to get some information, especially as you refer to the Spanish flu, hardly any information is there. There is no proper documentation system. But now things are changing. But I think we need to incorporate knowledge management system in the whole disaster management plan. That was the point. So please comment on that.
Actually, you have answered the question very beautifully. So I think that I would be just endorsing what you have said, that we need to have this knowledge management practices also involved into the disaster management framework. And we will have to reach to the all the sections of society with this knowledge management. That's why I mentioned we require local languages to reach. We require SOPs which are available on mobile. We could have various online engagement with the citizens for sharing the various practices followed. And I think you are perfectly dot on. We require to incorporate use the knowledge management framework practices in disaster management. So its point is very well taken. Thank you for that.
Sir?
Yes, thanks a lot, Raja.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I'll request Romi Khosla sir and Shipra Mitra ma'am to answer some of the questions. So, Romi sir, are you there?
Romi sir, can you hear us?
Measured and told us it is wrong. It's correct. It's the first time we use wrong.
Sir is not.
Shipra ma'am.
Ma'am is not here. Meanwhile, we have Vaishali ji. If you want to ask a question.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the opportunity. I have a question, and this is for for Mr. Romi Khosla ji. So I just want to ask: is it feasible for India to adopt the US model, so which they have recently launched this Environment Justice Department, where we can handle the all the uncertainties which Romy sir have mentioned in in his presentation. So like they are particularly in this department, what they are doing, they are increasing the community engagement and also collaborating with the various different departments like the water management system department or maybe land related department, and they are trying to work on the grassroots level by increasing the engagement of community. So I just want to understand, is it possible to adopt in India, and how we can do that, if he can throw some light on that. Thank you.
Okay, Amanji, you can ask. Aman Kumar Gupta ji, you can unmute and ask. Okay, but Romy sir is not responding. He is here.
Hello, Guru.
Amanji, can you ask? Okay, nevertheless, so we can move over to vote of thanks.
So there is one question for Samir and Hale sir in the Q&A box, if I can ask that.
Okay, go ahead.
So the question is, there is a National Disaster Management Authority of 10 members. 09 are nominated. Unfortunately, they hardly have meetings. In such scenario, what will be the future of India? This is a question from Jaspal Singh ji.
Well, I'm not competent to comment on the functioning of a national structure. But what I can say is that India has shown that the disaster management framework is functioning. It has shown time and time again that the systems do operate and the processes are getting institutionalized. And the disaster management framework is very, very functional in Indian context. So that was my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable information. As we have come to the end of last day of a 3-day online certificate training program on disaster resilient housing and built environment, imperatives for better policy, planning, and sustainable cities, I, Naina Agarwal, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM, and IMPRI, Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, New Delhi. We are grateful to our experts for this online certificate training program, Professor K.T. Ravindran, Ms. Suhasini Iyer, Ms. Vanessa Peter, Professor Manoj Parmar, Mr. Shamir Unhale, Shri Romi Khoshla, Professor Darshini Mahadevia, Professor Shipra Mitra, Professor Manjula Bharti, and to Shri Tikendra Singh Panwarji for conveying and moderating the session. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions, and we actively involved in the 3 days training program. Thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and efforts into understanding issues concerning laws, rights, and policies concerning women in India, which we believe must have benefited all of our participants immensely. Certificates will be available on the NIDM training portal after filling the feedback form within 3 working days. We have shared the recorded video of our training program in your mails for your kind perusal in case you have missed the live session. Thanks for organizing Team IMPRI Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, New Delhi, for conducting the whole session in a smooth manner. We are grateful if you are watching us live later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Thank you and have a good day.
Okay, so we also have Dr. Shweta Bedya Das, who will tell us about the certificate process. Shweta ji, over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. At the starting itself, I would like to thank all our participants. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that you have, gained a lot of knowledge from this session, and also hope to see you in our future programs as well. Before we part away, I would just tell you that those who have registered their participants in the training portal, NIDM training portal, they are eligible for the certificate. Also, please make sure that actually, I should have told this on the first day itself, but please keep it in mind for the next training programs. Whenever you register in NIDM portal, please make sure that whenever you join any of the NIDM program, you are joining with the same name with which you have registered, and also with the same mail ID which you have given during the registration. Also, please make sure whenever you are joining any program, you are there for more than 80% of the total time. That means 3 days total time. So we have to be present for more than 80% of that time. And whenever you are joining in a program, please write your proper name, because that name only go for your certification. So many of the cases I see that people join like Dell or 1234 or Samsung or MI, but please don't do that. Please write your proper name and mail ID. That's a must, because otherwise we are not able to provide the proper, certificate. So in that case, what we do, we remove those names because we are not able to know the names. So please don't do that. So if you are following all these things, that will ease giving you the certificate. So thanks a lot for joining, and also a big thank you to IMPRI for organizing this wonderful 3-day training program, and also heartfelt thanks to all the eminent speakers who have joined us for last 3 days, and we have learned a lot from all of you. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, and see you again.